Okay, so let's jump into the course. First of all, once again, exactly like the HTML course, this is a course for beginners or for those of you who just want to refresh their memory. So let's take a look at what we need for this course. First of all, some basic HTML knowledge. You also will need some basic PC or Mac knowledge and a physical PC or Mac. Then for the web browsers, as I said in the HTML course, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, even Opera, maybe, but don't use Edge or Internet Explorer. So what does CSS stand for? It's actually short for Cascading Style Sheet, and it's a declarational language that controls how the web page looks. So as I said, if the HTML is the skeleton of the web page, CSS is the style of the web page. And we can create CSS documents by just creating a document, then .css would be the extension for the document. Now, some properties associated with the selectors, because you will see if we want to apply some style to something, to a tag, to an ID, to a class, then we have to declare it or get hold of it. For example, for the paragraph tag, we'll take the paragraph tag, then opening and closing brackets. Then we would have the key value attribute, the property value pair. So in this case would be that the paragraph should have the color of yellow and the background color of black. This would be awful, but that's how it is. Moving on. So where do we write CSS? In an HTML page structure, we know we have the HTML opening and closing tags, then we have the head section of the page, and we have the body section of the page. Now we can write CSS within the tag, so this would be a inline CSS. We could declare it as style, the attribute, then would come the color and then the value, red, and this would turn our H1 into a color red. Now, so this being in the body within the tag, a inline CSS. Now we could also start it with an opening and closing style tag, and within here we'll grab onto our H1 and then once again color red, or the preferred way is actually creating this link and again give it a href for a completely new CSS folder, or actually a CSS file. Now, really short about this crash course. We'll go over the basics, we'll take a look at colors, at fonts, at positioning CSS, at pseudo classes, pseudo elements, display grid, and display facts. And we'll also take a very short look at media queries, and then actually create a short landing page using CSS. Now, specific to CSS, we have the CSS selectors. So this is actually the way that we select CSS. So in CSS, we have these so-called selectors. Now, by selectors, we mean that an ID, a class, or a tag can be selected as following. So for an ID in a CSS document, we will first type in hash, then the ID name, so the ID that we declared within our HTML. For the class, we will type in a dot, then the class name that we declared in CSS, or in HTML, and for the tag, we would only just use the tag name. Now, a declaration is by taking first of all the selector, then starting the declaration by opening it, then we're writing the property, for example, color, font size, padding, and then the value. For the color could be red, for the font size could be 16 pixel, for padding could be 2 rem. And then we'll close up our declaration and end it. And this is actually how it would look like. So for the H1 tag, for example, we'll open, then declare color, red, close it, and the H1 will have the color red. Now, writing and editing CSS is actually just like HTML. You could take any editor that you wish, for example, in our case, Visual Studio Code, Atom, Sublime Text, Brackets, Notepad. And you could create your own CSS document, so writing and editing it within this editor programs. Okay, so let's get started and create our first CSS document. Okay, so the way we create CSS documents is by just creating first of all a folder. Let's call this CSS not CAA, CSS crash course, and just drag and drop it into your Visual Studio Code editor. Okay, within here, we just click new file and we will call, first of all, let's create a index.html. And within here, we'll create a boilerplate. So by hitting the Shift 1 key, hitting enter, and then let me just create very quickly a style.css document. And you can see the icon here indicating on this is a CSS document. Let me make this bigger. Let's give this a title of CSS Crash Course. And within here, let's also create an H1. And again, just copy this title from here. Okay, hit save, and now let's open it up into our live server. There we have our H1. Now, as I said, let me just make this larger a bit. Now, as I said, there are three ways of writing CSS. So there would be inline by writing within the H1 text style, then color, then the value of red, hit save, and this would turn our H1 into red. We could also within here, let me make this smaller and this larger, and this big enough, let me just increase it. Okay, so also within here, we could also type in text align center, hit save, and this would push our text to the center. Now the same thing we could do within our head by creating a style tag, opening and closing tag, and up here, grab onto our H1, then opening and closing brackets, and let me just take this whole thing out of here, copy it within here, and cut out this style, and this. Now if I would hit save, nothing changes because this does the same thing, but if I would turn this red into blue, this would change our H1 into blue. Now the preferred way to create CSS, or to write CSS, is by linking up our file that we created, our style file, by typing in here link, and this will automatically ask us for the href, so where is our CSS document. And for this we would just type in style.css. Now this is linked up, and now I would cut out this and paste it into our style file, and this will give us the same result. And just test it, type in again red, the H1 would be red. So CSS once again can be typed in inline within style tags, or by linking up the style document, the style folder within our head. Okay, next up, let's take a look at colors. And for this, I'm just going to copy in, just a short note, each file that is within this crash course, you can download it within the description below. So now I would just copy in a few files that are already created. Let's copy them in here. So we copied in our HTML files. These already have our CSS linked up. Just change this here. So the style 2 should be always style, because this was another document that I created. Okay, so let's take them in order. Where do we have our colors? And didn't copy in my colors. So back once again. There's also the style, the color HTML. Okay, now let's open up this file right here. Open it with live server. Now let's go through this really quickly. So we already gone through our basics. Now let's take a look at colors. Now down here, I already created a h3 with the class name. Let me just close this up. So within our HTML, you can see I already created this navigation. Just ignore this. But I created within this main tags, this section with the title of basics, then this section with the title of colors. And we can actually delete this. And this would leave us with our section colors. Now you can see this section has an ID of colors. It has an h2 with an ID of section title colors. Then a div that wraps all of this, which has a class of section content. And within this, we have an h3 with a span of name, then another span of colors. Now I'm going to close all of this. Damn, I have a lot of things open. Okay, so this would leave us with our color HTML opened. Now let's go into our CSS, and actually let's take this. And now let's take this class of named. So just copy this, go into your CSS, paste it in. So we target our classes by typing this dot, then name, or actually let me just start from the beginning. So if I want to target a class, I would type in dot, named, that's the name of the class. And now within here, I would give this a name color. And for this, I will first of all tell it that this is a color, and then I will assign it the color of red. And we can already see that the named, so let's take a look in our HTML again. So I wrap this named into a span. I gave this span a class of named, and then I targeted the class of named within our CSS and assigned it a color and the value of red. Now we could also change this to blue, and this would change the color to blue, or we could change this to green, and this would change our named into the color green. So this would be named colors. Now another thing we could do with this is, for example, take this class of color, go into our CSS, take the class again, and let's say we want to give this color, first of all, change the color to, let's say, red, and also change the background color of it, so background color, to black. Now another way we could do this is, instead of typing in a name color, we have hash colors. And for this, I could change this black by typing in, first of all, hash. So these are hexadecimal numbers, and they are composed of numbers and letters. So let's type in 111, or for example 333. This will give me a gray color, or for example 1A, 1A, 1A. This will also give me a dark color. So this would be the hash colors, or the hexadecimal colors. Now another thing we could do, so is first of all take the color, then RGB, and now we can choose between RGB and RGB8. And RGB stands for red, green, and blue. And within parentheses, it's asking us for 3 values. So for the red, for the green, and for the blue. And the RGB colors range from 0 to 255. So for a complete red, as you can see, we could take a 255 and other 2 values 0. This will give us a complete red. Now, for example, for a green color, we type in here 0, then for the green 255, and the blue will also leave at 0, give us a complete green color. And you also have this neat color picker within here, where you can choose and drag and drop. Now, a difference between RGB and RGBA, this is for the opacity. Now after our blue, we'll hit a comma, then the value within here ranges from 0.0 till 1. So for a complete one, actually let me change this to a complete green, complete red. And if I would type in here 0.1, this would be a complete black. And we can increase it to 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. You see how the color gains into its intensity. Okay, next up, let's take a look at fonts. So we could close up our colors HTML and open up our fonts. First of all, let's take a look at font families. So we will take our font family classes and copy it in with our HTML. So dot, copy paste. And if we type it in here, font family, it would give us the integrated font families that are already within our Visual Studio Code. So take a look at this font right here. If I would change this to Cambria, you see how the font changes. Now let's change this to Georgia, for example. And we could also change this to, let's take an Arial. And for example, we could also take the body tag and give the entire body family of, let's just choose some Sergio UI. This will change our entire body to this font family. Another thing that we can do with fonts, for example, if I would take this, so go back to our HTML, this class of font size, and type it in here, font size. I could change the font size of this font right here. So normally the basic font at which almost each browser starts is at 16 pixels. Now let's say I want to increase it, so double it, that this would be 32 pixels. You can see how the font changes to the double of its size. Now keep in mind that this is an H3. It automatically has a larger font than, let's say, an H4 or a paragraph tag. And fonts don't necessarily have to have pixels, they can also have EMs, or for example rem. So let's change this to 3 rem, 4 rem, and let's go back to 2 EM. Now I won't get into this measuring units right now, because this is just a basic course, but keep in mind that there are different units that you could scale your font with. Now another thing we could change with the fonts is the font weight. So let's go back into our HTML, take this class of font weight and copy it within our CSS. And for this we will just type in font weight. As you can see, we have this range of font weights. So for example, I would take 100. This would decrease my font. If I would change this to 300, let's say, this would slightly increase the font. At 600, this is much bolder. Or we could just take it up to 900 to make it very bold. Or for example, we could also change it to bolder. Okay, now let's take a look at positioning. Let's open up our positioning HTML, open up in live server, and these are the most commonly used positions in CSS, so relative, absolute, and fixed. So let's take our class of relative, go into our CSS, target it, and let's say we want, first of all, let's just give it a background color of, let's say, blue. Now let's position this relative. For this we will just type in here position and then relative. An element is positioned relative when it's positioned relative to its normal position. And adjusting the the top, right, bottom and left value of it will adjust it relative to its position. So if we would type in here top 20%, and then left 50%, and now take a look in our developer tools, and let's go into elements and select it. Let me just make this larger. Select our selector tools. Let's hover over it. So this is positioned. You can see the container of section content is the entire container, and within this container, this element is positioned top 20% and 50% to the left. So it's from the left 50%. Now let's take a look at position absolute and just go into our HTML, take our position absolute class. So let's take our class of position absolute, go within here. An element with the position absolute is positioned relative to its nearest ancestor. So if we would position this absolute, you can see how it goes over our content. And now we could give it top 20, let's just give it 50%. So the position absolute positioned our element absolutely within the entire web page. If I would move it right 50%, this would push it into the middle of the page. Instead, like relative, which was within its own container, positioned 50% only within the container. Now, let's take the position fixed, or the class of position fixed, and position this. So this element right here, let's position this fixed. Now this also needs to know where exactly it is positioned. Let me just close this up. So right now it is positioned fixed within the entire container. So if I would push it completely to the top, let's say 0, just type in here 0, it's positioned within the entire body fixed to the top. I can also push it down to the bottom. Now it's positioned within the entire HTML element completely down in the bottom. And we can also move it to the middle. So let's say left 50%. This would push it to the bottom middle of the entire HTML element. Okay, next up, let's take a look at pseudo classes. For this, we will open up our pseudo classes HTML, open it up with live server. Actually, let me just close up a few of these tags. And for this, I just created an ordered list. And for the pseudo classes, we will just take a look at two classes. So let's say that this is pseudo classes. We'll take a look at hover. And we will also take a look at first, last, and nth child. Let's comment this out. Okay, let's take a look at hover first of all. And for this, we will take the list class within here. And also target it as a class. Now for the hover, you would type in within here at the beginning, dot hover. Now let's say if we hover over our entire list, we want it to do something. And let's say we want to change the color to red. Let's hit save and let's take a look. If we hover over it, the text changed to red. And we could also type in here, the cursor should change into a pointer. So if I hover over it, the cursor changes to a pointer. And we could also change the background color to blue. So only when I hover over my element, these effects take change. Now let's take a look at first, last, and nth child. And what this do is target elements within a group. So this UOL list is composed out of 5 elements. Now let's try targeting each one of them. And for this, we will take this class of list. And within this list class, we want to target the allies. And now let's say the first child. And let me comment this out. This won't take any effect anymore. And now let's say we want only the first element to have the color red. So I typed in the class, and within this class, the first child of the list items. So let's change the color to red. This would change only the first item into the color red. Now, if I would want to change the last element within this, instead of the first child, we'll type in last child, and let's change this to blue. Now let's say I want to target the third element, and for this, we'll just type in here the class, the allies, and from the allies, the nth child. And which child do we want? We want the third child. So within here, we'll type in 3, go down here, and let's change this to the color of green or green-yellow. As you can see, only the third child has now the color of green or green-yellow. Now, we could also combine these two. Let's say the fourth child. So class of list, within this, the allies, and within this, the nth child, so the fourth one. And we want, when we hover over it, this to have the background. And first of all, let's give it the color of white and the background color of black. So let's see what this does. So if I would hover over the fourth child, this would change the background into black and the color of the item into white. Okay, next up, let's take a look at pseudo classes. Now let's open up our pseudo classes HTML within our live server. And let's create here a comment. We will name this pseudo classes. And with the pseudo classes, we will only take a look at two things: the before and the after pseudo class or pseudo element. And what these two do is exactly what the name says. They put something before or after the element. So let's take our class of element1, go within here, take a hold of our class, and right after element, we'll tell it that before. And now, what do we want to put in before? Well, it needs first of all a content. And within here, we could write in a string of read this dash. It already appears, but we cannot select it. So this is just pushed in before the element. Now we could change the color of this red. We could also change the font weight of it. Let's say 900. And we could also change the background color of it. Let's say something Now what the after does, it puts a content after the element. So let's type in within here, this is after. So the before pseudo element puts in something before the content, and the after puts in something after the content. Actually, this should be down here. Now let's take a look at how can we display something as flex and then something as grid. Let's open up our flex HTML and open it with live server. Go into our CSS and let's take this class of display flex. This should be display flex. Grab onto our display flex, and if we want to display something as flex, we just type in display, then as flex. And as default, flex always displays in a row. Now if we want to change this, so if we want to change the direction of the flex, we would just type in flex direction. And instead of a row, we could change it to column. And this would flex into a column direction. We could also do column reverse. This would just reverse the items, or row reverse. This would reverse the items within the row. Now let's leave this as column. Okay, we could take out this reverse. Okay, next up, let's take a look at displaying as grid. And for this, we're going to go into our grid HTML, open it with our live server, then go into our take this display grid class, come in here, create a comment, so we know that this is the display grid. Now paste in our class of display grid, and exactly like displaying flex, for display grid we will just type in display as grid. Now let's say we want to display this as a 2-column grid, and for this we will type in grid template columns, and there are a few ways we could display this as grid. We could specify the width of the grid, so let's say 100 pixels, and we want this to be 2 times, so 2 columns of 100 pixels, and this would split up our grid into 2 100 pixel columns. Now if we want to create 3 columns, then we could just paste in here another column. Now let's say we want to increase the space between these columns. We can type in justify content space around, for example, or space between, and the space between would split up the space between the elements evenly. Now we could also have space evenly, and this would split up the entire space evenly between the elements. Okay, so next up, let's create a landing page using CSS3. And for this, we're just going to create a new folder. Then our desktop, we're going to call it CSS landing page. Okay, now open up our Visual Studio Code, and let's open a new window here. And take this folder, drag it and drop it within here. Let's make this just larger, close this up. Within here, we just create an index.html, HTML, and a style.css. Within our index.html, we'll create a quick boilerplate. We'll give this the page title of CSS landing page, and link up our CSS style sheet, our CSS style file here. Okay, let's open this up using our live server. Close the other one up. Now within our body, let's create a header section. And within here, I'm just going to create a div and a class. So if you create a div, then type in dot, this will create a class, and we'll give this class the class name of background. Within our div, we'll create an h1 and type it in here, CSS landing page. Now underneath our header, we will create a nav tag, and within the nav tag, we will create another div with a class of logo, and within this we'll create an h3, then a span tag, and we'll type in here Manhart, or you can type in here whatever you want. Then under, let's make this smaller real quick. Then after our span tag, we'll create a break tag, and then type in here media, or you can type in here anything you want, and this would put the media underneath our span tag. Now underneath our div and still within our nav tag, we'll create an unordered list, so UL, and within here we'll create an anchor tag, and this will send us nowhere. And then create an li, so a list item, and give this the name of home. Then we will copy this 2 more times and replace this with portfolio, and this one with contact. And within here, we'll also paste in to copy this contact and paste it in here, and within here we'll paste in our portfolio. And we'll do this in order for us to, for this anchor text to send us to this section of the page. Now underneath our navigation, we'll create a main tag. Underneath our main tag, we'll create a section which will give the ID of portfolio. So just copy in this and copy the section again, and this would be the contact section. So with the ID of contact. Within our section, we'll create another div with the class of portfolio container. So portfolio container. Jesus, I can't type today. And within this div, we'll create another div with a class of box. Actually, I'm just going to close this till I'm done with my HTML. Now within our div with the class of box, we will create an h3. We'll just name this portrait or photo. Okay, let's copy this div 5 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 6 of them. Then go down into our section with the ID of contact. And down here we will create another div. And we'll give this a class of contact container. And within our contact container class, we will create another div with a class of submit. And within our div with the class of submit, we'll create an h3. And let's name this get in touch. And underneath our h3, we'll create a form tag. And we'll take out this action. And within our form tag, let me go up here. We create another div. And within this div, we'll create a label tag for the name. and we'll call this name. And after our label, we'll insert a break and then a input tag with a type of text. And we could actually take out this name and ID. We don't need this, but what we do need is a placeholder for your full name. And now let's copy this div and paste it in underneath our div, and we'll tell this that this label will be for the email. I'll copy this, paste it in here. We'll change the input to the type of email, so it would have some basic validation. And within here, for the placeholder, your email. Now we'll copy this div again. And now we will have here a label for submit. We'll type it in here, submit your request. And this input type will be the type of submit. And instead of a placeholder, it would have a value. And for the value, we'll type in here, submit. Now underneath our form and underneath our our first div, so this div closes up here, we'll create another div with the class of contact information. And within this div, we'll create an h3, also get in touch. And underneath our h3, we'll create a label, and we'll leave this empty. And I'm just going to copy in all of this. I really don't want to type all of this out. So we just copy in these labels. Let's quickly just go over them. So address, some street 25, with postcode and the city, website, email, phone number, and fax number. Okay, so that's it for the HTML. Actually, we still need, the last thing that we need is underneath our main, we'll create a footer tag. And within here, we can type in powered by Manhattan Media. And then an ampersand, copy 2020. So we also got our footer tag down here. Okay, now let's jump into CSS and let's start styling this. And this is something I didn't show you till now, but this is a basic general, actually this is a general reset. And this will take out all the margins and all the paddings that are by default in each browser. So I'll go margin 0 and also padding 0. So I don't have any conflicts within this. Now let's take a hold at let's take our entire HTML tag, and I want to set the scroll behavior to smooth. And this actually, what this would do, if I would click on this anchor tag, so this should send me to my sections, then the scrolling will be smooth. So first of all, I'm going to comment this out, and I will show it to you later. Then I will take the entire background and give it a color of a RGB of 43. Then 13, and then 180. And now for the text color, I will just go with a hash of FFF. Now I want my entire text align to be centered for the start. And for the font family, I'm going to go with, where is it? Where is you? There you are. Sergio UI. Okay, now I'll take my header tag that I created and try to have a height of 100 viewport heights. And everything that's in the header will have a height of 100 viewport heights. Now I'll target the header tag again. And within this, the class of background that we created. And I'll tell it now to have a background image of the URL. And I'm just going to paste this in here. And for the background size, I'm going to go with cover. And for the background position, I'm going to go with center and center again. Now I could actually take out this background color and also create a image folder here where I'll copy in my image. So there's the image. And as I said, you will have all the documentation in the description below. And for this, I'm actually have to go one up. Let's go with image, and within the image folder, there's our photo. Now for the height of the photo, so the height of the background image, I'm going to go with 100 viewport heights. So this will take off the entire height of the viewport. Now let's take our H1 that we created. Let's go up here. Just a very quick note, if you click here on the white tag, you can smoothly scroll up and down. So where do you have it? There it is, the H1. Actually close this up. Now let's take our H1 tag, because we have only one, and let's give this a color of RGBA. And for this I'm going to go with 255, 255, 255 and 0.8. So this would have a bit of a opacity. Now let's give it a font size of 10 rem. Actually, I now have to decrease my Chrome zoom. Give it a letter spacing of 5 pixels. So this will give me some space between the letters. Text align center is by default because we already defined it with text align center. And now I can actually take this out. And I also want to give this a bit of padding from the top, from the top of 5 viewport heights. So we just pushed a tinge down. Now, in order for the text to pop out, I'm going to give this a text shadow. And for this, I'm going to go with 0, 20 pixels, 10 pixels, and also a RGBA of 10, 10, 10, and 0.6. You see it has this nice dark shadow. Now let's take on our navigation tag. And we want to position it fixed. So this would be fixed up here. And now let's tell it to go top 0. So we will really position to the top with 0. Now we will give it a width of 100%, so it would take up the entire width. a background color of inherit. So this would take off, so it would inherit the color of its parent. Then I want to display this as grid. And for a grid template column, I'm going to go with 20% and 80%. So this will split up this into 20 and 80%. So let's take a look in our developer tools by tapping F12, take the selector tool. You can see this grid is, wait a second, here it is. Let's go to the navigation. So as you can see, it has 20% and 80%. And I did this because I want to have the logo, so the div with the logo to have only 20% and the UL that I created, the unload list, to have 80%. Okay, let's close up our navigation tool and align the items to the center. Okay, next up we'll take the class of logo that we created, and I just want to push it one rand to the left, and for this I'm going to give it a padding of 0 top and bottom and 1 rem left and right. As you can see, it's a bit pushed to the right. Now for the color of it, I will go with hash F4. I also want to change the font family. I'll go here with Lucia. Then the text align should be centered. The letter spacing should have 1 rem. I will change the font size to 1.2 rem, and I will also change the font weight to, let's say, 300 rem. Just 300. 500. Let's see how this looks. 600. Yeah, that's much better. Now also give this a box shadow, and this will give it a box shadow for the parent. And for this I'm going to go with 0, 10 pixels, 15 pixels for the intensity or for the spread, then an RGBA, and I will go here with 5 opacity. And now I will give it a background color of RGBA, and here the opacity should be 2. Now if you can see this already, this has just a bit of a box shadow here. So let's go to the reset again. I keep forgetting to pull this up because I know you can't see it because of my face. Okay, now let's take the logo again to the logo class, and within this we'll take the span, because we wrapped our wrapped our name into a span, and we'll just change the color of this to goldenrod. Now let's take the nav tag again, and within the nav tag the anchor tags. And for this we'll first of all get rid of the text decoration, so of the dots here. Text decoration, I'll tell this to be none. This will get rid of the underlines. Then we'll also change the color of them to F4. Now we'll increase the font size to 2 rem. We'll also increase the font weight to 500. And now we'll take out the list style by declaring as none. And this will get rid of the dots there. Now we just want to give this a bit of padding of 1 rem top and bottom and 2 rem left and right. And also give this a background color of RGBA, and with the opacity of 1 rem, actually 2 rem, to have the same opacity as the logo. Okay, now when I hover over the anchor tags, to change the color to gold, this gold rod that we declared up there, and to have the background color of RGBA, and let's go with 6, and also a transition of ease in out of 0.05 seconds, actually 0.5 seconds. So if I hover over them, they will transition. I know this looks really dumb right now, but we need to display them as flex. And for this we'll take the navigation, and within this the UL, and we'll tell this to be displayed as flex. And now it's flex within a row, and now we will justify itself to be at the flex end, and this will push the whole navigation to the right. As you can see, if I hover over it, how the color changes now. Okay, now I'll take all the section tags and give all of them a height of 100 viewport heights. And now I'll give them a background color of linear gradient. So let's take a look at our sections down here. And the first gradient should have a 217 degree and a RGBA of totally red, so 255, 0, 0, and the opacity should be 0.8. And then I will give this another RGBA gradient. So let's just copy this once again. And we'll take out the opacity here. But I want this to have a 70%. And we need to wrap this up, close the parentheses here. Now for the other direction, we'll copy this, paste it in here. We will change the degrees to 200 to 127, and also change the color to black, so 000. The opacity to 9, and we'll also leave it at 70%. Now we'll create another linear gradient. Copy this within here, and this should have 336 degrees, the opacity of 8, and we'll take, actually we're missing something here, and this should be also 0, and also this 0. We're missing here 9. We'll give the color of the text here of F4, F4. Just take a look at in here. This should be actually background, not background color. And there we have our linear gradient. And then let's copy this. And instead of section, before the section, we'll type in here main. So this will target the main. And then within here, we'll target the last child. And we'll just switch around this to 330 degrees. This would change our gradient in order to match the other one. Okay, next up we'll take our portfolio section. So let's go into our HTML and take our portfolio class, or portfolio container class. Copy this and target our class within here. And this we want to display as grid. Then give it a grid template column of repeat. And we'll repeat 3 times 1FR. Now we'll also justify the content center and also justify the item center. Take a look in here. So they are pushed to the center. And we'll give this just a bit of padding from the top of 15 viewport heights. So they're just a bit pushed down for the top. You can already see if I click on the portfolio, this would push me down. And you see how it jumps down to the portfolio section? Now let's go up here and comment back in this scroll smooth behavior. If we click on this portfolio, it scrolls smoothly down to our portfolio section. Now go back in here, our container, and after our container, or portfolio container, we'll take up the box class and we'll give this a background image with a URL, and I'm just going to copy in this URL. So this is a URL from Unsplashed, and in order to see something of this, we'll give it a background sizing of center. There already are images, but they are still too small. And for this, we're going to give them a height of 300 pixels and also a width of 400 pixels. Hit save, and now image repeats here, but we will take care of this a bit later on. Now we want the text to be aligned here to the center, so we'll just type in text align center. This will align the text to the center. Now let's increase the size a bit. Let's say font size of 2 rem. And now let's also give these images a bit of margin of 5 pixels solid and the color of F4 actually. Now wait just a second, this is actually the border. So this should be the border, and the margin should be only 1 rem. So they will be pushed a bit away from each other. And we deleted our closing brackets. There we go. Now I also want to give this a bit of box shadow. So for this I'm just going to type in here box shadow. And I'm going to go with this one. With 0, 10 pixels. 10 pixels again. Okay, now let's take care of our other images. And for this I'm going to take this class of portfolio. Then within here the class of box. And for the boxes, now I'm going to take the nth child, so the second one, then the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth one. This would be 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm just going to change the image within them. I'm just going to copy in the URL, so if you want you can type it in, but if not you will have it in the download folder. So this should be this. Oops, misclicked. So this URL. For the third one, we're going to take this URL. They are Ctrl V within here. Then the next one. Then the fifth one. Then the fifth. And the last one. So this would give me these images right here. Okay, now let's take care of our contact page, or our contact session. And for this, I'm going to take the ID of contact and I'm going to assign it the height of 100 viewport heights. This would be so much easier with SASS, so next course, SASS, 100%. Now, the container. So I should just copy this container within here. So contact container class. There we have it. Without this. Now give this margin of 0. I will give this a margin of auto, a padding from the top of 30 viewport heights. So just push this down a bit, this whole container. Then I will display this as grid. Oh my god. So I will display this as grid. And for the grid template column, I would go with repeat 2 times 1FR. So there'll be 2 columns displayed here. Now we justify the content to the center. So content will be positioned in the center, and also justify the items to the center. So the items will be pushed within the center of the entire container. Now for the contact form, just type a comment in here. Contact form. We will now target the inputs. And within the inputs, I want first of all to target the inputs with a type of text. And let's copy this one more time. Type it, content, the input with a type of email. And now these two should have a height of 2 rem. So I increase the height of the inputs. And let's give this a border radius of 5 pixels. So I have a smoother border here. Now let's increase the width of them to 300 pixels. And also change the font family, which you type it in here, to Verdana. And also change the background color to RGBA. Now open and close parentheses, 179, 12, 12, and 0.5. This will give me this dark red color. And I want the, so when we type it in here, to be white, so we change the color within here to F4. And as you can see, this has a bit of borders here. In order to take out this border, we just type in border none. And this should take out the borders. And we can also target within here the placeholder. And we can give this a bit of padding of 0.5 rem. and also change the color to F4. So this give this a bit of padding and also change the color of the display text. Now let's target our input type of submit. So input with a type of equals to submit. And let's give this a height of 2 rem, border radius of 5 pixel, a width of 100 pixels, margin of 2 rem top and bottom and 0 left and right. Let's take a look at this. So this is what we're targeting here. Then I want to position this relative. And now I can play around with it by telling it to go left 40 pixels. Now let's change the font size of this. Actually, let me take out the automatic save because this is getting really stressful. So after delay, off. Only on save, so only if I hit save. So I want to change the font size to 1 rem. Change the font weight to 500. The letter spacing we could also change here to 1 pixel. The background color to complete black. The color within the inputs to complete white. And let's also take out the border and tell it to be displayed as none. And now I want, if we hover over this button, so the submit. So let's take the input type again. Actually, I could just copy this. Whoa, that's too much. So copy the input with the type of submit. And here, if we hover over it, that we want the background color to change to white. The text should change to dark, so #111. The font weight is changed to 600. The cursor should be pointer, so we hover it, the cursor should turn into pointer. And I will also give it just a bit of a border of 2 pixels, solid dark. Now let's hit save and see what we have here. So if we hover over it, this changes into white, and also the background changed to white and the color changes to... Okay, so next up we'll take our submit class, and within this the h3, and we'll change the font size. So all the h3s within this class to have 3 rem, and also I'll also give this a bit of padding to the bottom of 2 rem. So this right here. And isn't this an h3? Because I wanted to change both of them. So let me just take a quick look. The submit, this is within here. Class information. Actually, I should take this. This should change both of them. Okay, now for contact information. We'll take our class of contact information. Do we type in contact information or contact info? Contact information. We'll take this class right here and we'll display this as flex. And for the flex direction, we want it to go into a column, and we'll justify the content with space between. And let's hit save. So this is flexed into a column and with a bit of space in between them. Okay, now we'll take this contact class again, and within this, the labels. So all the label tags, we'll give them a background color of #222, the darker color. Then we will increase the font size to 1.2 rem. We'll give them a bit of margin of 0.5 rem and a bit of padding, so all around padding of 0.3 rem. And for the border radius, we'll type in here 5 pixels. And the last thing we want to give them is a width of 350 pixels. Now let's hit save, take a look at here. That's much better. Actually, I also want to change the font family because I don't like this at all, to Verdana. Okay, next up, we will style our footer. Ooh, that's a lot of O's. Footer. With 2 O's. Footer. And we'll take our footer tag. We'll position this fixed from the bottom 0. This should take up the entire width, so 100%. Text align should be center. We give this a background color of almost complete black, and the color of the text should be that gold round that we defined. And there we have our footer. Actually, we could also increase the font size of this to, let's say, 1.5 rem. That's much better. Okay, so if you click here, this will take us home, portfolio, contact. Now the last thing we need to do is, if we, let's say, decrease this, I want these images to align in 2 columns. So let me just go here and extend this. And for this, we'll say media. And we want to give this a max width So when this has the max width of 1200 pixels, I want the class of portfolio container to have a grid template column of repeat 2fr, 2 times 1fr. So it will hit save and just go underneath the 1200 mark, you say it displays as in 2 columns. Now if we can take this further, and let's take our heading here and let's make this smaller. So if we reach this, is it now in 2 columns? Yep. So if we reach this, we want within our header the H1 to change its font size to 4 rem. Was it 4 rem? Oh, actually smaller, to 2 rem, let's say. And this is not a class, it's actually the tag of header. Let's save this again. Go underneath 1200. This is too small. Let's go with 5. Actually with 4. Now we could actually leave it at the initial state, but I want it to be pushed down, so heading from the top, not from the left, from the top, to be pushed down a bit to 40%. Let's hit save. Let's take this out. So if I'm reaching here, nope, then this should be in the middle. Okay, so when we're here above 1200 pixels, and when we reach 1200 pixels, they should go to the center, be pushed down. Now we can also take this further and let's say, how does our navigation behave? If we at 1200, it's okay. So actually down here we need to change it then. So we will leave this as it is, close this up, hit save. Now I'll create another media query. And for this we'll say max width. Actually we could copy this. So if the max width reaches 750. So here we want this to have only one FR, so be displayed in one column. Let's hit save. Let's go down to our portfolio. Are we not under 750? We should be. Okay, now it's displayed as one column. Actually, to make this smaller, let's say 600. Whoop, misclicked. So that's 600. Now actually larger at 800. So we're here, and if I go down, perfect. Okay guys, so that's it for our CSS landing page. Hope you liked it. If you did, thumbs up. If you didn't, thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more of my content, and ring that bell in order to get notified when I post a new video. So see you in the next one. Bye bye.